Lieat's story mainly focuses on two characters. Theo, a self-described con man who changes both his name and his appearance with every town he visits, and Defina, who the game's title is mostly referring to, who's a dragon girl that can materialize lies into these little monsters that she can then proceed to eat. Thus, lie eat. Of course, we have some other important recurring characters like Brett, and this is how his name is written. It's not Brett, it's Brett, but God, pronunciations in English are so hard sometimes. Who is a dragon that has kind of a trauma of humans, which we'll get into more later. And because of that, he has this hateful attitude towards them. And Neo, who is an immortal undead dragon who acts as the captain of the police force in Light's world. Every single other character is more of a single appearance kind of character. They only really appear and influence their own stories in the only games that they are featured in. So it's more interesting to talk about them in the context of the stories of these games rather than go on about them in detail here. Though to tell those stories, which has with most stories I cover on this channel, are told through flashbacks or through hints throughout the games. So to make it easier and more digestible, I'll be just telling the whole story in chronological order. But the crux of Light's story, despite it being mostly focused on Athena, is Theo. And some really interesting hints towards that main story involving him are given in a very subtle way throughout the games. As despite being a self described con man, if you analyze his actions throughout the games, you'll see that he very rarely actually hurts anyone. In fact, he seems to help a lot more than he harms people. And the only people he really harms are people who are, well, actually bad people. So, despite his rude attitude and him being a self-described con man, as I said before, if you analyze his actions, he's quite a swell guy who tries to and succeeds at helping most people he comes across. And this is important because Theo in reality is one of those cliches in anime where the guy a guy who acts all rude and aggressive because they think that's the best way to protect people, either people in general or that they care about, or they do it in sort of a tsundere way in order to hide these more honorable, caring persona, you know? And the reason he became like that is due to his story as a character. In essence, Theo used to be part of a group of street orphans who essentially formed a found family around the name Leonhardt. And Theo was the main provider for this group, though the other kids didn't feel right about that and wanted to help him, which is why they tried to help in the way they could and steal from a criminal organization. Obviously, this gets them caught and gets them in pretty big trouble with said organization, causing Theo to essentially have to save their skins by offering to work for this criminal organization in exchange for their lives. However, Theo, being the caring guy that he is, not only wants to get them out of this situation in this specific instance, he realizes that he has to, if he wants to prevent them from going down a dark path or from this to happen again, that he needs to resolve the problem at its root. And so what he does is that he also sells one of his kidneys in order to get a ton of money, right away and then gives this money so that the other kids in his found family can go on to have normal lives, to get out of the streets, to make something of themselves, while only he like have to serve a criminal organization. Of course, if he is honest about this, he knows that the whole problem is just going to start up again, which is why he develops this aggressive attitude. He acts like he just wants to get rid of them, they're not important, and that he just wants them out of his sight in order so they don't feel like helping him and don't involve themselves in trouble anymore. So they actually go and do what he says and try to live better lives. Of course, as Theo describes it, you don't simply get out of a criminal organization, at least not alive. And so, even after he works for them and pays the debt that essentially the other kids accumulated, he has to outright run away and hide from them in order to not be assassinated, which explains why he changes his face and name in every single town he goes to. And that's how he develops again this attitude of that I talked about, of being rude and of lying and of being dishonest even with the people he cares about, because like he truly cares for them, he truly wants to help people in general, and he thinks that these lies are the best way not only to keep himself alive but to help people. Though obviously this life is not an easy one, and so one day he wishes for a way to not be so overwhelmed by these lies, for a way to ease his burden. And conveniently, as he wishes for this, he finds a dragon egg, which hatches into Efina. And he thinks this is all coincidence, but it all has to do with the nature of dragons and magic in this world. Because you see, in the world of Lieat, there are many animal people. There are many people with animal characteristics or outright werewolves or werecats sometimes. But all these characters are classified as humans. And the reason for that is that despite their very out there appearances, their very divergent appearances, they all have quite similar capabilities in terms of physical capabilities. While dragons are the only beings that can effectively use magic. And they can't just use any magic. Their magic is very specific. They have very specific powers. And that's because dragons are born out of powerful wishes of people. So if you have a powerful wish in the world of Light, that will manifest as a dragon with the capability of fulfilling that wish. And obviously their magical capabilities are going to be tailored towards that. So, for example, Brett, that I described earlier, he has the ability to phase through walls because the people that wish for him to be were a group of criminals who abuse him and force him to use his powers to aid in their criminal activities. Neo is an immortal dragon exactly because the person who wished for him to be was the previous captain of the police force. A woman who, tired of seeing all her partners die around her, wished for a partner that would never die, causing Neo to appear. And of course, Theo wanted someone to ease the burden of his lies, and so Efina, a dragon who can eat lies, was born. However, of course, this wish was done in a moment of weakness because he genuinely does believe, despite suffering from it, that these lies are the best way to protect himself and the people around him, as we covered earlier. And so he, at the beginning of the game, is quite reluctant to let Efina eat his own lies, which is why she even says that for the most part she can't even see these lies. She can't materialize these lies exactly because her powers are being kind of contained by Theo's desires. And stepping out of the summary for a moment, I just have to say how cool this is. It's such a limited power or magic system or however you want to call it, because not only do you need a very strong wish, but this wish manifests itself into the form of a sentient being. A sentient being who has their own individuality. You see, for example, Efina use her powers for the benefit of other people, or you see dragons like Brett who outright don't want to use the powers in the benefit of the people who created them, or who even go on to use their powers to completely oppose the people who created them. And so it's a very limited and very volatile magic system. It's very uncontrollable and, again, not very versatile. And that's what makes it so interesting. That's what makes it so unique and fascinating. And this idea of powers not only being like magical powers being difficult to obtain, but so difficult to utilize, and having even their own individuality, which causes this, is just a very cool idea that I wish was explored more in fiction. And it's very good because, like I said, they manifest into these like individual beings who not only have their own thoughts and opinions, but that are completely detached from their creators. So if this influences the game, the more like the world of the game a lot, because there are a lot of people in the world of Light, and that's established from the very first game, that wish to buy or to even traffic dragons. There are people specialized in killing the original wishers, the original people who made the dragon come into being in the first place, and to sell these dragons with magical capabilities to people, which is a very realistic thing that would happen. There are tons of bad people out there who would obviously want to make a profit out of these abilities in really unethical ways. And so it's a very sensible and very interesting way to not only execute on this concept, but to develop it to its logical conclusions in a way that is satisfying and is interesting and is just so well done in so many ways. God, I love it. But back to the summary. Essentially, after Efina comes into being, begins to use her powers in his adventures in order to, obviously, like I said before, help solve certain cases. And again, as much as he describes himself as a con man, most of the time he makes his money in a legitimate way by, again, helping people. And he even goes into debt or into the red a lot of times, because not only is he a good person that wants to help out as many people as he can, but he is also a very good father. And so he is willing to sacrifice himself a lot for his newfound daughter, Efina. So again, that's just another really good hint that he isn't this like awful person that he wants to portray himself as. However, as noble as his intentions are, obviously lying so much to people would caught on to him at some point. And in fact, throughout the games, the main issue that we see is when a person is consumed by lies and becomes themselves one of these lie monsters. So, given that Theo is a professional liar, why hasn't this happened to him yet? Is one of the main questions throughout the games. And it all comes to a head on the third game. And you might have realized that I kind of skipped over the more specific story of the first two games, and that's because they act more like Monster of the Week kind of stories. They are very fun, and I do recommend you play them through. You can understand the story, the main story of Theo and of Efina and how all this comes to a head by only playing the third game, but those events kind of lose their impact without all the character development and without all the time that we see Theo and Defina interacting with other characters. A lot of world building is lost if you don't play those two games. So you can skip to the third, but even if those don't fit too much into a summary format like this, in the sense of actually experiencing these games for yourself, I would implore you not to do so. Please play all these games if you're going to play them. Trust me, it's going to be worth it. It's the first two episodes are essentially filler for the most part, but they are that type of filler that improves the story, not that type of filler that takes away from it. I hope I'm making myself understood with this. I hope I convey my point well enough. But anyway, what happens is that while attending a high class party in the place of one of his friends, essentially, Theo is ambushed by those childhood friends that we talked about, as we come to realize that, much like him, they also have become essentially people who do bad things for a good cause. Just like he lies as a way to protect people, they have become phantom thieves, i.e., people who steal, but only from bad people, and use the money they steal not as a way to benefit themselves, but those less fortunate. Which makes sense as you play the game, you discover that the only reason this rich person has the artifact, this precious artifact that they are exhibiting in this party, is because they made dealings with criminals, with a gang. And so, of course, phantom thieves would target a person like that, right? But unfortunately, given what Theo did to them, or at least appeared to do to them, they are also quite bitter towards him. And so this is not only a noble, like, act to punish the wicked, but also a way to get their revenge on him. And they do this by essentially destabilizing Athena's powers in order so that allies begin to consume the environment all around them, and eventually even Theo, as a way to make him pay for what he has, again, seemingly done to them. This abandonment, this disdain that he essentially gave them, leading to both him and Athena being separated, as he, as a kind of professional liar, is more able to handle even being consumed by lies than most of the other people we've seen throughout the games, and thus is able to control himself enough to run away from her in order not to hurt her. But of course, Athena is not just going to let her father die like that, and so she employs the help of the other dragons in order to get a grip of even her out of control powers as much as possible, in order to try to help her father in the best way she can. And throughout the games, you can experience various bad endings, but they're mostly very abrupt and not worth talking about in a summary like this. Again, they're very important to experience, but they're not very important to talk about in this kind of video. But the different endings for this story are: if, as Theo, you simply confront the main Phantom Thief friend directly without talking to the other two, he will fall into despair and be consumed by lies, leading to him becoming a liar monster too powerful for Athena to handle. And so she is forced to accompany this new corrupted version of Theo, hoping that as she grows up, she is able to finally rid himself of lies, given that as a kid, she isn't able to right now. In the normal ending, as this is the bad ending, if that wasn't clear, if Theo is able to talk to the other two friends, it is revealed that despite these feelings of like revenge and anger that they have towards him, all of them still hold him in high regard. They still want to believe that he is a good person and that he had a reason to do what he did, despite not admitting it directly. So this eases Theo's guilt for this main lie that set him on this path in the first place and allows him to resist a bit more his transformation, leading to a liar form that Athena is capable of defeating. However, if Athena is underleveled for this fight, which the appropriate level to fight this boss is apparently, at least by the game's logic, level 12 or above, and we'll get into that later, she won't be able to rid Theo of his lies normally, as obviously he has lied more than any other person she confronted throughout the games, and so she will need to sacrifice himself in order to properly help her father and the people around him, leading obviously to Theo being left alone and mourning the loss of his daughter, blaming himself for not being able to avoid this, for his own mistakes causing his own daughter to have to sacrifice herself in order to save him. It's essentially the very tragic story of a father having to, in a way, bury his own daughter, which no father obviously wants to do. Every father wants the opposite to happen. Every good one, at least. And in the game's true ending, of course, if you grind like a motherfucker, because let me tell you, you will not achieve level 12 just by normally playing the game. It's very annoying. I don't understand why they, because you can fight this boss comfortably. The combat in this game really isn't that hard at levels 8 or 10. Like, you will not have any difficulties if you're simply at level 8 or 10 or even 7 or 6 of defeating this boss even solo if you have at least like 70 IQ, right? And so I don't like this requirement because it just makes the game really grindy and takes away from the fun and from the impact that the ending would otherwise have, in my opinion. They should have put a lower level cap. But anyway, the point is, if you go into this fight with Athena being level 12 or above, she will be strong enough to like rid Theo of his lies without needing to sacrifice herself. And this will lead to the game's again true ending, where Theo tells the truth to his friends finally and make them realize that their like revenge is for naught. And this contributes well into Theo's arc, which is why it's called the true ending, because this is, I guess, what canonically happens, as it's the more satisfying and interesting conclusion to all the characters, as this is the final push that Theo needs in order to understand that though lies may be necessary to help people sometimes, it's important to be true at least to the people you care about, which is even why after the ending he vows to never lie to Athena at least. Not only does he tell the truth to his childhood friends, but he vows to always be true, at least to the person he cares about most. Which is quite the heartwarming ending, and the one I'm thankful is the true canon one, even if it was pretty annoying to get. And in general, I think it was pretty clear, but I love this game, man. This was such a joy to play. I would love to do so again. If I had the opportunity, I would gladly play this game. These games in general, I'm referring to all the chapters as if it's one game, one, two, three times, because they're just so fun and satisfying. The characters are, as you probably saw, by just reading the text on your screen. So well written and so charismatic and captivating. The art style and the like attention to detail on everything, from the enemies to the little animations to the art, like the CGs. Oh my god. This game is really good, and I would genuinely like recommend to you that you play it. It's a very short experience. All the games took me, all of them, all three, took me around 6 hours to complete, and every single minute was worth it. These games are amazing, and I think I left enough unexplained, even if I gave away the main plot, that you will still get a lot of enjoyment out of them if you do decide to go play them yourself. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend you do so, if that wasn't clear enough already somehow. And that will be it for today. If you like this video, please do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc. And I genuinely do hope to see you next time. If you really liked it, I'd also really appreciate if you could support me financially, either through a one-time paid comment donation or by joining my membership, where for $1 a month, you get to participate in exclusive polls in order to decide which videos I'll make next. Like, which of my plans should I focus on? Which of the content I have in mind do you want to see first? That kind of thing, as well as get your name put in this fancy little screen right here. Just as a small gesture of appreciation, exactly for your monthly support. But of course, no matter how much you choose to give me, as well as if you choose to give me anything at all, do know that I really appreciate any cent you're willing to throw my way, as well as just the fact that you're watching this video up to this point at all. But with all that stuff out of the way, I think it's finally time to, as always, bid you guys farewell. Obscure Anime out.